And then, with no further ado, I shall interview and introduce Ben Harvey from FAR, who looks after the herbicide resistance work for us, and he's going to be talking about managing herbicide resistance in autumn sowings. Welcome, Ben.
All right, so
and I'm going to move out of the way now.
Hi, everyone. Happy to have this opportunity to talk to you about this this topic, which I'm pretty keen on. So I'm going to share my screen here. This one, I'm going to make that bigger. So I've just put this together at quite short notice, and I hope I've got everything that's relevant. But it is possible I've missed something. So yeah, do get those questions into the chat if you feel like there's something that's missing and you want to ask about it, and we'll either answer it, as Anna said, straight away, or we'll come to it at the end. So this is a big topic, as Anna talked about, and really today I just want to focus on what we can do right at the moment. So this is relevant to people doing autumn sowings, and I think that's where we'll focus our efforts. But there's no reason why you can't ask questions about other aspects of this topic later on if you'd like to, especially if we have time at the end. I don't have anything in particular I need to get on and do. I can shift things around so we can go long, I think. So yeah, I'm Ben Harvey. We're going to talk about herbicide-resistant weeds. So let's just start. I think it's relevant and important that we have a bit of understanding of what's going on. I think that some basic understanding helps us manage the issue across the whole farm, across the whole year. So we'll just talk about this a little bit, and we'll go from there, and then we'll get on to the actions that you can do at the end in the second half. So let's just imagine you've got a field, a paddock of ryegrass that you're growing for seed, which a lot of you will be doing. And what we've come to realise is that if you've got a seed crop of ryegrass, or probably any grass, then it's not a matter of is herbicide resistance going to develop. The fact is that it's already there. One estimate of the amount of plants that might actually have that herbicide resistance gene in them is 1 in 10,000. There can be quite a lot of variance depending on quite a few factors, one of which, the main one of which appears to be cultivar. That there will be about 1 in 10,000 of those plants that are actually resistant to particularly group 2 herbicides, but perhaps some other ones as well. So if you work that out, that works out about 400 plants per hectare actually have that gene. Now that's there, whatever you do. The point is what happens to those plants. Of course, most of the seed from those plants gets taken off and sold, but as you know, particularly ryegrass, that actually seed shattering is a big issue. So a lot of that seed will be returned to the soil. And there will be a seed bank. You can kind of make some calculations, but you all know that ryegrass seed crops will leave some seed behind in the soil, and it's a question of what do we do with that. There might be 1,000 or more plants per hectare, or seeds per hectare, which grow the following season if you don't do anything about that seed. Now that's fine, because that's still a low percentage of those plants. But what can happen is that if you start selecting for those plants, if you start killing everything else and leaving the resistant plants alive, if you do that over successive seasons, then what can happen is that those plants can predominate. And when herbicide resistance becomes a problem is when it becomes a weed population. So you actually start to get a predominance of the resistant plants in a particular location. So we're just going to talk about how that happens. So the biggest reason why you go from just a few plants at a paddock to actually having an issue is that if you're carrying on using those herbicides over and over again, perhaps in the same crop, but certainly over successive seasons, you'll be killing everything else, and the only ones that are going to survive are the resistant plants. They'll set seed, you'll have another generation, and so if you're continuing to use the same mode of action herbicide, then you're going to have a problem. So what can happen is, I talked about already, that selection of resistant individuals those biotypes will dominate, and that you'll get a resistant weed population. So if you think about how that might happen in a paddock, you might have that one plant that's got that resistant gene. That's quite rare, but you've got that plant surviving. You spray all the other plants, and that plant survives, proliferates, sets seed, and spreads its seed out. The seed doesn't go far, but over a few seasons it can go out 10 meters or more, and you end up with these patches of herbicide-resistant weeds. And they can often be also near fence lines, coming out from fence lines, where there's various reasons which I won't go into why that can happen. But we can also, maybe put a bit more time into our fence lines to prevent that from happening. So this is just a diagram showing how that happens. The dark green plants are the resistant plants, and at first there's just a few of them, but the more you spray the herbicide to which they are resistant, the more of those individuals will be present in the population, to the point where they dominate the population, and that herbicide is no longer effective. So let's talk about what we know about the New Zealand situation. So some of you will have seen this map before. The coloured parts are the parts of New Zealand where we've done surveys on arable farms. The two numbers that are in brackets were just done in maize. They're just up in the North Island, so they're not particularly relevant to us. But you can see, and you may know this already, but South Canterbury is kind of a hotspot, but we're not far behind in Mid Canterbury and in the Selwyn district. The Selwyn district one, which was the 54% number, that was done 5 years before the Mid Canterbury one, which is the 60% number. So whether or not the problem has gotten worse since then and the numbers are more even or even higher than those now, we don't know. If we had the funding, perhaps we'll go back at some point in the next few years and see if there's been an increase or a decrease, with awareness getting better. But we definitely know that Canterbury is the hotspot. It's where the biggest issue is. And part of the reason for that is that we grow a lot of grass seed crops, and those grasses, we already talked about the way they shatter seed and leave seed behind. Those grasses are genetically one of the more likely candidates to develop herbicide resistance. So, I already talked about that. South Canterbury has the issue, but what about the rest of Canterbury? The feeling is that it's not as bad here. Certainly, anecdotally, talking to growers, there's serious problems on some farms in South Canterbury, and we don't think we have quite as bad of a problem anywhere here yet. But things to be aware of, it is the same weeds and it's the same crops. So it's those grasses. Ryegrass is the most common one that we found in our surveys, and the crops that seem to cause these to proliferate other cereals. So because, as we know, grass weed control in cereals is one that there's only limited options, and those options are the ones that are developing herbicide resistance. At the moment, we don't have a lot of availability of resistance testing. Resistance testing also needs seed from the mature plant, which, by the time you get that seed, send it away, get it tested, get the results back. Often you need to have taken action anyway. So we want to be a bit more agile than that and be able to take action before we're at that point. Canterbury tends to have more rotation options. I go down to some growers in South Canterbury, and they might have a 6-year rotation. 4 of those years will be cereals, 1 grass seed crop, and 1 oilseed rape. That's one grower that I talked to. And if you're putting that much pressure on your your monocot crops, and you're only having 1 in 6, which is a broadleaf, then you're really putting pressure on the herbicides that you're going to be using on those cereals in particular. They also, quite a few growers in South Canterbury are reluctant to use spring sown crops. I think I've got a slide later which will talk more about why spring sown crops are an effective tool for just disrupting weed life cycles and getting on top of herbicide resistance. The other thing that we have going for us in this part of the country is that we have a bit more time to think about what we're doing here, whereas it crept up on those in South Canterbury without them knowing about it. So, and evidenced by the fact that you guys have asked for this webinar, forewarned is forearmed, as I've written there. So we do have a chance maybe to get on top of this problem before it becomes something that starts to lose us money. So let's you guys may know this too, but the 3 herbicides that we know have resistance issues in New Zealand are the Group 1s, the Galant, Twinax, which is pinoxidin, and some other ones. Clethodim is in that group. Clethodim seems to be a bit more robust than the other ones in Group 1. It seems to work for longer, maybe 3 or 4 more seasons before it loses its efficacy against resistant populations. But all of those ones in there are ones that we've found resistance to. So that's that. Group 2, those are the big ones for grass weed control and other broadleaf weed control as well. They often use in cereals. There's 3 products that I've written there which are all registered for use in cereals. In Canterbury, we've found ryegrasses. Chickweed is more in the south, but we think that could happen here as well. Field pansy was one we had flagged by AgResearch. I haven't heard any more about that, whether or not that's gone further than that. But maybe keep an eye out for that. If you see any field pansy that seems to be getting away and should have died and hasn't, let us know. Glyphosate resistance is more of an issue in areas where you use a lot of glyphosate over and over again in the same spot. Such as vineyards and non-cropping areas, fence lines. But we are starting to see a few scattered instances of ryegrass being resistant to glyphosate on arable farms in Canterbury. So those are the weeds we know about already. Are there any other ones that we should be having in the back of our minds just to make sure they don't get away? The 2 big biosecurity risks that have been flagged to us, we know about blackgrass. We keep an eye out for that one. We have had a couple of incursions that we think have been controlled, and it's no longer here. But if there's a strange weed growing in any paddock that you don't recognise, that is something that you should bring to the appropriate authorities' attention immediately. Blackgrass in particular has a lot of resistance issues in Europe and in the UK. I guess genetically, perhaps it might be just predisposed to be able to sequester away those herbicides and make them less effective. So, any weird weed, just make sure you have a look at that. What about the ones that are here already? Mayweeds and groundsel are 2 that we know have had resistance issues overseas, and bromes and perhaps some other grasses. I think one of the things about grasses, we know that ryegrasses are already a problem, but if there's any grass that you're growing for seed on your farm, then it's probably potentially an issue for herbicide resistance, simply because of the numbers. A lot of herbicide resistance is based just on probabilities and the chances of things happening. So the more weeds you have, the higher the chance that one of them might be herbicide resistant, and there could be a chance that if you select for it, it will become a resistant population. But just to reiterate, we haven't found resistance in any of those species so far. I haven't mentioned hairgrass there. We haven't found any resistant hairgrass yet. God forbid, I guess, because that would be a real issue. And just to reiterate, I said Group 1, Group 2, and Group 9, but Group 2 are the ones that are the most at risk. That's the predominance of cases that we find, and it's the most common one overseas as well. So that's the one to be aware of. I just have I've got a wee slide in here about glyphosate resistance. It is increasing. We think. We haven't done a survey on this. Well, in the surveys, we never found it. So it's definitely not as big of an issue as Group 1 and 2 herbicide resistance, but it is there. It often comes out from fence lines, but not necessarily. Excuse me. And because there are other options, if you catch it early, then you can definitely manage it. It might cost you a little bit of extra money and some time and some headaches, but you can definitely manage it. So keep an eye out for that one. So let's sort of get into the practical side of things. I'm going to go through a few considerations that are relevant at this time of year. But the first one is to get the basics right. Basic weed control is herbicide resistance management. If you are managing weeds properly, then the chances of the herbicide resistant weed population developing goes down drastically. So don't ignore weed flushes. Get on top of them early, and not only will you be boosting your yields, you'll also be reducing your risk. It might be a bit late for this now, but have a robust rotation. Depending on what kind of farm you are, you could have pasture in the rotation, which we believe is a big plus for reducing the risk of herbicide resistance. But having those broadleaf weeds in there as well, that's important. Broadleaf crops, so your oilseed rapes, your clovers, your other legumes, brassicas of other kinds perhaps, vegetable seed crops. All of those allow the use of other herbicides and can reduce your risk. So that allows the use of multiple modes of action of herbicides. I'm going to talk more about that later. If you can include any mechanical weeding in your program, then that is also a plus, because herbicide-resistant weeds will die to mechanical weeding, same as any. And we'll talk a little bit about cultivation and the effect that has on herbicide resistance. All of this is parts of a bigger whole, which is integrated weed management, which you've no doubt heard of before. We've got quite a lot of resources about that on our FAR website, and I won't go into all of them today. I don't have time. But if you want to learn more about that, there's definitely a lot of resources, and we can point you in the direction of those. So the first one that I want to talk about is the rotation. We haven't, got really hard data on this, but it seems to be that the more ryegrass seed crops you have in the rotation, the higher chance of herbicide resistance ryegrass weed population developing. Those are the ones that have the highest risk, and we think the main reason for that is the predominance of ryegrass plants, both in pastures and in seed crops on farms in New Zealand. It's everywhere, and that means there's more of those resistant individuals out there to be selected for. Why aren't I clicking through to the next thing?
I'm using the wrong side of the mouse.
No, I'm trying both now. Oh, there we go. Okay, I'm not sure what happened there. Right, so I talked about how grass seed crops will shed seed and shatter seed and be left in the soil. So if you're following a grass seed crop with a cereal, that's a risky combination because those grass weeds will come up and they need to be controlled, and there's few options. And so we know that that's a risky combination, that it increases your risk. There are ways to mitigate. We'll talk about those. The longer rotation, the better. I haven't got examples of these, but you guys will know more about these than I do probably. So, and I already talked about having your legumes in there as well. So, any other crops that aren't sort of the monocots, which are cereals, grasses, grass seed crops, maize. Although maize actually is a good thing to have in the rotation because it's spring sown. Spring crops are good because if you're always planting an autumn crop in the same paddock year after year, then the paddock is getting maybe drilled or at least cultivated perhaps at the same time of year, and the weed life cycles get used to that kind of cadence, and they'll grow at the same time, they'll seed at the same time. So if you could start doing something different, it just disrupts those weed life cycles. Perhaps a cover crop in there which might get grazed, which gives a chance for those resistant weeds to germinate and then get grazed off and then get sprayed off. So that's a real plus for trying to get rid of some of these herbicide resistant weeds. So we'll talk about cultivation. Now, this was one that was actually specifically asked by some growers who have requested this information. Now, I had to do a little bit of research on this one. This is not one I'm an expert on, so this is some of the stuff I found. So some of you will be doing regenerative practices. Yeah, no-till probably doesn't inherently raise the risk of herbicide resistance, but it does change which weeds become a problem. As you probably know, you'll get more smaller seeded species, weed species. Hairgrass is often a problem. It's very small seed. Other grasses are probably also an issue. So some of those species which become an issue might be high risk species such as ryegrasses. So it's just a matter of knowing what your weed profile is and being aware of your options of controlling them. We talked already about following a ryegrass seed crop or any grass seed crop with a cereal. I know a lot of people simply plough that seed under where it doesn't have a chance to germinate down there. So that's definitely an issue. Some people don't like ploughing, so they have to find other ways of dealing with that seed bank. Cultivation is quite a common practice in integrated weed management and on organic farms, because cultivation can encourage that weed flush before sowing emergence. So that evens up that weed germination. They all germinate at once, and you can maybe hit them with one herbicide or maybe do another cultivation to kill them before you sow. Yeah, so I've got that there as well. So, excuse me. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else I want to say about that. We can come back to that. People may have questions about that, and I'll attempt to answer them later if you like. So let's talk about herbicides, and I'm going to focus on grass weed control and cereals because that's where we think we have the biggest risk. So I think our main tool to fight against herbicide resistance, and this is not only for preventing the development of a herbicide-resistant weed population, but also for combating it if you have it already, is pre-emerge herbicides. Most of them are based around group 15 chemistry. So these are your Securas, your Firebirds, your Avidexes. There's other things as well, but those are the ones that are registered for use in cereals. Secura's just wheat, but the other ones I think are barley as well. So those are really important. They are quite effective if they're used properly and if you get the rainfall that some of them need. But there are some considerations. First of all, don't rely on them by themselves. We've already talked about the fact that relying on a single herbicide by itself over and over is how you get a problem. And we've had some testing done in Australia, or Bayer have actually, and have shared with us, and we're allowed to share with you, that there does seem to be some low-level resistance developing in some grass weeds in South Canterbury to those group 15 herbicides. But as long as we don't rely on them on their own, then we should be okay. That shouldn't go any further, but it's just to be aware of. And anytime you can have some sort of cultural control, like mechanical weeding or the other ones we've already talked about, then you should definitely do that. Now, I've talked already about how group 1 and 2 herbicides are the ones that are the problem. That doesn't mean that you should stop using them, because they'll still be effective, particularly early on in a herbicide-resistant weed population developing. They'll still be effective on maybe 90% of the weeds there, and you've still got to control them. But especially talking about early on, forewarned is forearmed. If it's important that you know if you have any escapes. I talked about it, how a herbicide-resistant weed population can come out from a single plant, and if you've got a small patch 1 year, then it could be a large patch the next year. So that's where you go out, perhaps with your Roundup, spot spraying. Some people just go out and simply pull them out, rogue them. If it's a bigger patch, you could take it for silage or spray areas. I've seen a bunch of different things used by people down in South Canterbury in particular.
So can I just ask this question there?
Yes.
Because you mentioned before group 2 herbicides are the ones that are most at risk. So if you think you've had a miss or something doesn't look as good as it should, or there's a few strays out there, don't ignore them. That's your key message?
Yeah, you've got to do something about them, because if they return the seed back to the seed bank, then you've just got that issue multiplied by, 10, 100,000.
So don't think it's don't assume it's operator error.
No, and it easily could be, of course, but it's worth it, especially if you think, you know what the risk factors are, and you use your brains and think, well, what, is this worth having a go at? Because these things can become expensive if they get out of control. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. The other thing to talk about is to use full label rates. We know that some types of herbicide resistance start off being able to survive lower rates of herbicide and then progress to be able to survive higher and higher label rates. So if you just start off using your full label rates, then you reduce your risk straight away. So we definitely recommend against going at half label rates or anything like that, for those products that are on label, at least. But that we know that's a risk factor, is going in with those lower rates. There are off-label options as well, which I'm sure you all know about. We have herbicide screening trials at FAR where we try some of these, and you will have seen some of that information before. We don't necessarily recommend or not recommend any particular product, but we know that they are used by growers in New Zealand, and they are sometimes a little bit of a last resort, sometimes just used because we know that they're perhaps used overseas or whatever. But we won't give any specific recommendations here, but you can talk to your agrochemical person. I know of one person who was recommending Boxer Gold to a grower down in South Canterbury, which is not on their cereals, on their wheat, and it's not labelled for wheat yet. But that's just something I heard about last week. So let's just talk a bit more specifically about herbicides now. So I guess you'll all be aware of Secura. It does need that rainfall or irrigation if you have it, and if it doesn't get it, it's not as effective, and you can get escapes. However, what we sort of seem to see is that if you're not getting the rainfall, you might not be getting the weed flushes anyway, and when you do get the rainfall, the Secura becomes activated, and but you will still get escapes if there's no rainfall. And what you can do is you can include a different pre-emergence herbicide or a pre-incorporation herbicide, such as Treflan or Avidex. I've also seen, we talked about something like Turb, Gardaprim, and all of those included. If you think you've got a particularly big issue and a problem, you might want to actually throw a bit of extra money at that and include 2 pre-emergence herbicides. Now they're all group 15, but they do in our trials and elsewhere, where they do seem to make Secura more effective by including something else. Firebird, of course, has been around for a long time. It's a solid option. With or without pre-emergence herbicides. Some things will escape, of course, and they need to be dealt with, but anything that you can bring the weed numbers down is a plus. Post-emergence herbicides in the cereals for grass weed control, you're mostly talking about the group 2s, and if you already know you have a group 2 issue, then you've got a problem. But Rexaid for bromes, Othello, which also has broadleaf control, and Hussar you'll be aware of. So if you know you do have a group 2 problem, then you've got to try and find other options, whether they be off-label or IPU we've used in trials, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it isn't. We're not really sure why. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not. It's probably around rainfall. Twinax, of course, is effective on ryegrasses. It's a group 1, and it has its own herbicide resistance issues. Wild oats seem to be quite commonly developing herbicide resistance issues to Twinax, but it's still an effective herbicide, of course, when you don't have those issues, and it can definitely be included. If you think you're group 2, go for a group 1. We are not aware, I don't think, of any weeds having resistance to both group 1 and group 2, although it definitely happens overseas.
So I'm just going to jump in there because you've mentioned wild oats, and we've had a question about wild oat resistance, and I'm not a chemical expert, so the question was actually around phenoxaprop. What's the active ingredient in Twinax?
It's a group 1. Twinax is pinoxidin. Phenoxaprop is, I forget, is that Puma?
Puma.
Puma.
Yeah. So that's a group 1, and if you've got resistance to one group 1, you've probably got resistance to them all. Phenoxaprop is one of the ones that loses its efficacy first, and as I said before, clethodim is one that can still be effective if you've lost the phenoxaprop or pinoxidin, or some of the other FOPs and dens.
So wild oats is back to roguing.
Yeah, I think that's where we've seen to be most effective is roguing the wild oats, which is
so we've got
not great, but it's the best.
So we're talking Puma and Twinax both having problems.
Yeah, if you have problems with one, then it's extremely likely you've got problems with the other.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, because they're both group 1s, and from what we've seen, that's what happens. Some other considerations. So if you're concerned about this, maybe it's because you've already actually seen some patches where you are worried. And if you know that there are any issues where you've got a problem, then that's where you should be focusing your efforts, focusing your money. That's the place to put in a break crop, an oilseed rape or something else, or a spring crop, put in some maize or something like that. Just be a bit smart about how you spread things around, and you got to keep the cash flow going as well. So already talked about considering cover crops, grazing them off, spring crops, pasture if you've got that ability in your system to put pasture in for a while. Spring crops are also effective as well. I haven't talked yet about stale and false seed beds, but I kind of alluded to them in the cultivation part. I've got some more slides later about stale and false seed beds. We'll talk about them in a second. Don't neglect your fence lines. The places where it's worst, the farms where I've seen it be worst, it does seem to be worst around the fence lines. So whether or not that's because those fence lines were neglected and not the weeds there weren't controlled effectively over a number of years, perhaps, it's hard to say, but it's likely. Excuse me. So we've even seen some growers just take out fence lines if they don't have stock on their farms. And then there's some other things you can do, like move where the virtual fence line, there's not an actual fence, but where the boundary between crops actually is, like move it 5-10 meters in one direction or the other every season, so that you don't have that same non-cropping area every season. I quite like that idea. And also, it can be more expensive, but if you've got a particularly bad fence line, or if you think there could be an issue with some weeds, go in there with something else that's not just glyphosate. There's a number of products that you can use, and you'll know about them, tag and so on. So, hang on, did I miss anything? No, I didn't. Okay, so
just while you're on other considerations, I've got another question, and
sure.
I'm not sure if it's one you'll be able to answer, and because it's about actual spray application and mixing. So does the water quality, like the water that you're actually putting in your spray tank, have any impact on the efficacy of those herbicides?
So we know that it does have an effect on glyphosate. So glyphosate probably means it does have an effect on other herbicides as well. Everyone will be different because they will have more of, there'll be more of an effect on them with things like pH, precipitating out some of the chemical or whatever, or just reducing its efficacy. So yes, water quality does have an effect. Yeah, so if you want to make sure you're getting the most out of your herbicides, yeah, and I definitely glyphosate, it does. You want to make sure and even using good quality glyphosate as well. I hate to say that
no names
at all, but we are quite aware that there are differences in those glyphosate products, and some are more effective than others.
Okay. And there's another comment just come through suggesting that glyphosate, but also group 1s will be most affected by the water quality.
And thank you to that person. I wasn't aware of that, so that's great. Okay, so yeah, I'll move on then. So a false seed bed, this has sort of come out of organic farming, I think mostly, but it was also something that they used before we had herbicides back in the 50s and 40s and before then. So the idea of a false seed bed is you cultivate and you get that weed flush, and then after the weeds germinate, you go in with another cultivation to kill those weeds, and then you sow. So it's just a way of delaying sowing, having an extra cultivation in there after getting a weed flush to reduce the number of weeds that you have coming up. Fairly simple. A stale seed bed is very similar, except that you only do one cultivation, and then you wait between that cultivation and sowing so that you have a period of time that allows the weeds to strike before you sow. Well, actually you sow, in this diagram you can see that sowing happens right after the very first cotyledons come up from the weeds, and then you leave it a bit longer, but before the crop comes up, you come in on this diagram, it's thermal weeding. I got this from an organic farming guru who you may know, but you can also go in with, instead of thermal weeding, you can just go in with a non-selective herbicide like glyphosate. And that just kills off the weeds before the main crop comes up. You need to get your timing right, of course. It's quite important, but can be quite effective, and you don't need to do that second cultivation in this instance. Mechanical weeding, we're starting to do some research on this at FAR. This is FAR's tine weeder. It is down in South Canterbury, and I've got a video on the next one. Let's see if it works. I don't know as much about these as some people. Oh, come on. I need to click this button. Here we go. So it rips through the paddock pretty quickly, up to 20 kilometres an hour, I'm told. And so that was down in South Canterbury. We did that last year, and we didn't see any effect on the crop from doing that. The crop was fine. It is. So
can you tell me what the crop was and what the weeds were and what the timings
the ryegrass weeds? There is a crop up, but you can't really see it in that image. There are the first, first blades of the wheat crop coming up. The grass weeds that we were having a problem with were ryegrass, and ryegrass that we knew or at least suspected had a group 2 resistance issue. So we were really keen to, even if there was one plant every square metre or less, we still wanted to try and get them. So we went in and had a go. We think it was pretty effective, but it was hard to tell because the weed burden was very low. Secura and Avadex had both been used in that paddock, but it was very dry. So the grower was quite concerned that there was going to be, and we could find them. We could go in and see the ryegrass weeds coming up, but they were few and far between. So it was hard to get an exact handle on how effective that had been.
So that's a grower who's especially cautious because they know they have a problem?
They absolutely, and that has been tested back when the availability of testing was a bit more possible. So that's just an option. Time weeders are available. There are other people in FAR who are more qualified on this to talk about that. But if you are interested in having a go at some mechanical weeding, get in touch with us. I can put you in touch with someone who will talk your ear off about that. There's yeah, I'll leave that one there because I'm not as well versed in that topic as others. Was that the last one? Yeah. So, okay. I'm just going to point you towards these. Now, if you know how to use a QR code, then you can use these. If you don't, find your nearest millennial and get them to show you how to do it. But you point your phone camera on the one that you're interested in, and a little yellow link will come up. Or at least on an iPhone, it's yellow, and you can click on that, and it'll take you there. But these are some resources that we have on the FAR website. Actually, I tell a lie. The one on the left is from an international website, and it's sort of quite a good overview of what herbicide resistance is and how to prevent herbicide resistance. The integrated weed management one, if you're more interested in knowing more about that one, that's something that FAR has. And then if mode of actions, group 1s, group 2s, what does all that mean? If that's something that's really new to you, there's a poster that we produced a few years ago, which is on the right there. You can use your phone to find that one. You can also search for any of those things on the two on the right on our website, and you can find them too. Yeah, the left one is from the HRAC, if you want to search for that.
And HRAC is?
Herbicide Resistance Action Committee. It's an international group that's trying to reduce herbicide resistance worldwide. And that is the end of my talk. So we'll go to questions. Shall I bring back the camera perhaps at this point?
What I'm also wondering is if we could manage to do a quick Ask FAR demo.
Oh, all right. Let me just stop sharing.
Hang on. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's try this. Okay, we're going to go back to sharing the screen.
Oh, yeah. And we need to share. Have you got a instance of a browser up?
I'm about to.
Oh, you were doing that one.
Yeah.
Okay. I did my mouse was suddenly going wild.
Okay, so the other option for finding information, this is just me doing a wee advertisement for one of our latest tools. If you jump onto Google and find the FAR website, I have it on my computer sitting there all the time, but onto the FAR website, far.org.nz. Up the top here, you'll see a little button that says Ask FAR AI. Ask FAR AI is a AI tool for searching the FAR website, and you can ask questions rather than searching the website itself and putting keywords into the search bar. If you come into Ask FAR, you can actually ask a question. So questions we have had, what wild oats, what herbicide resistance issues are there with wild oats? Ask the question, and I've spelled it wrong. Usually it actually does pick up.
I've just had a message saying that your screen isn't shared at the moment.
Okay, my screen's not shared. Interesting. Okay, share this window. Okay, trying people.
Go to that one.
This one?
And then go up to share. Yeah, go up to...
Up here to share.
Well, oh, you need to click on the window.
Hang on, I'm going to come back to
click
here.
on that, yep.
And then to share.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, people. And then I am...
Go to window. Yep. And then...
I want...
FAR research, what were they? Yeah, the second one down.
There we go. Sorry, people. Sorry, FAR website. I'll go back. So go to the FAR website page, which now that's in the way. The front page of the FAR website. There's this little thing up the very top that says Ask FAR. And then you can ask a question. Is herbicide resistance a problem in wild oats? And I've spelt everything wrong, but actually it's quite forgiving of things like that, and we'll see what it comes up with. What this search function is doing, it's only searching the FAR website. It's not searching the whole world, it's searching documents within the FAR website. So instead of, if you searched wild oats at the front of the website, it will probably come up with about 50 different links for you to go to. What this does is produce a quick summary based on those 50 documents that are on the FAR website. So it's telling you, I can address, yes, it's indeed an issue. It's a known problem in Canterbury for at least 5 years. That talks about the prevalence, it talks about challenges, and it talks about control options. So that's a summary. Now you'll see after a lot of these answers, there's a little number. So here, number 2, here, number 4. That tells you which documents on the website it's been dragging this information from, and they are linked down here. So if you think here, there's information about herbicides that oats were found to be susceptible to or not. That was in link 4, and that's efficacy and crop safety of different herbicides. That's the update we put out a month ago. Probably. So if you click on that link, that number there, number 4, because you want to know more about it, it will take you to the page in the website, in that document where the information was sitting. So it's a nice, easy way. It highlights in pink the bit that we were talking about. This trial uses tame oats as a proxy for wild oats. So if you've got a question and you're trying to find information on the FAR website, that is a much quicker way of finding it.
It's not the most recent one, but previously.
So, like I said, you can ask any question at all, and it will come up with the answers based on information that's on the FAR website. People quite often ask, what does it tell? What does it do if it doesn't know the answer? And I have a question here for that. Where is the question? These are some previous questions that always shows you down the other side. I can't find the question, so I'll do a new one. Once it's given you the answer, you can ask another question. And this is the one we like, or people tend to like. Do cats eat possums? Question mark. And so you can ask questions. The website will not give you stupid answers. It only develops answers based on the information and see it. So your answer to that silly question is, I don't have knowledge to answer questions about zoology or animal behaviour. So you can be reasonably sure that it's only going to give you the answers you want. So that is Ask FAR, and I really recommend everybody has a go at it. Okay, back to Ben. Are we back to you?
Yeah, okay, so I guess people can ask their questions that probably they don't have to do it in chat, but do we have any other chat questions that you wanted to talk about?
No, nothing else has come through in the chat. Has anybody, hang on. Oh, hang on. Gary, okay, so yes, there's a couple of comments rather than questions.
Cool.
Okay, wait on, coming up. Thank you for your questions. The theme of the New Zealand Plant Protection Society Symposium in Christchurch in August is ag chem resistance, so that is something to keep in mind.
I'll have to go to that one, seeing as it's here.
And there's also a suggestion we need to update that mode of action poster, which is highly likely because it was 2021,
so
yeah.
Oh, that's easily done. That was Nicole, wasn't it? I think I saw. Yeah,
does anybody have any further questions? Okay, given that there are no more questions coming through on there, I just have one question about herbicide resistance and the weed seed bank. So how long does ryegrass seed stay viable in the soil?
You know what? I think I'm going to defer to Dr. Phil Ralston on this one. I think it's about 5 years, but it can be more.
Phil, do you want to turn your microphone on and answer? Here he is.
Yeah, annual ryegrass seems to live longer than perennial ryegrass, but 5 years is a good working number.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then the other thing I wanted Ben to clarify, because he said, you need to deal with those escapes, and he said that a couple of times. I want to know what dealing with those escapes
Roguing, spraying them out. What else? Are you taking it for silage if it's a big area? It's probably not many other options. You know, yeah.
So
I can't
it's
really think of many others.
keep an eye out for anything that doesn't die the way you would expect it to.
Yeah.
Don't assume that it's operator error, and find a way to get rid of those plants.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. The main thing is not to make sure that that they don't set seed that's returned to the ground.
Cool. Okay. Well, I think given that there's no more questions, no point prolonging the morning. Thank you very much.
Get out
Ben.
there and enjoy this beautiful.
It is, seems to be
I think it's meant to turn later.
overcast, going nasty day. So thanks everybody for attendance. I will actually email all of those documents that Ben referenced to people that have registered for this event. So if you didn't get the QR code thing, don't panic. We'll flick you an email.
Yep.
Have a good day.